It is many people's dream to own a Porsche GT car at some point in their lives, including mine. So today I'm going to talk you through the 10 cheapest that you can currently get into that have depreciated a bunch in the last few years. Starting pretty high but getting pretty low as well. If you want to see the same video again but just with special Porsche instead of GT products, then do hit the like button. I reckon we can go even cheaper. Subscribe as well for 2 videos every single week. Let's get straight into it. Let's get started with the most modern 911 we'll be talking about in this video, the 992 GT3, a much less aggressive version of the mesmerizing GT3 RS. It's not as track focused as the RS, but it still is built with the track in mind, which is proven of course by the 911 GT3 Cup car taking this car as its base and sharing the same basic engine. These come with a lovely 4-litre flat 6 engine, making 502 brake horsepower, taking them to 60 in 3.8 seconds, not insanely quick by modern standards and not the quickest car on this list by any means. It's wider, more squat and more powerful than the previous generation, despite sharing the same engine, and that rear wing with swan neck pylons helps to produce more downforce than any previous GT3 generation. It took some inspiration and parts from the 991 RSR and got either manual or PDK gearbox options. I reckon given how much cheaper the 991 GT3s are, these will continue to drop in price over the next few years, though that does of course depend on the future of combustion cars. These will run you around £145,000 at the bottom end now, and you'll typically find 2021 examples for 10k more than that. Having a 911 GT3 is a dream in and of itself, but when you tag RS on the end, it takes it to a whole different level. The 996 GT3 RS was the first 911 to get that full badge, but the 997 really cemented the formula that badge has taken forward ever since, being a proper step up from the GT3. It did take them a while though, with 3 different engines, the 3.6, 3.8 and 4-litre examples. Sadly within our price range we'll only be getting the smallest of those engines, but that's not the end of the world, as that 3.6 litre flat 6 puts out 409 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.1 seconds, pretty decent. This was of course a homologation car for multiple racing series, which arrived in 2007 with a bunch of weight reduction features like the adjustable carbon wing, plastic windscreen and the rest. It's wider than the 997 GT3, looking more like a Carrera 4 despite being rear wheel drive, and inspired the looks of more modern GT3 RSs more than the 996 seem to. To get into one of these you need to spend around 140k at the bottom end, and for 150k you'll find many decent examples from around 2007. Anyone who bought a Porsche Cayman GT4 RS or equivalent drop-top Spider RS for overs must be absolutely screwing right now. Around the 2023 British Grand Prix, fellow YouTuber Aldous and I were arguing about whether it made sense to spend £230,000, significantly above list, for a low mileage 718 Cayman GT4 RS. I said it's a lovely car, he said it's not worth the money. I think we were probably both right, as it's an absolute beast, but you can get them now just over a year later, starting at £126,000, with plenty available for around 140k from 2023. Imagine buying in July last year and losing 100 grand in value just like that. Insane. For that kind of money you're getting the same engine as the 992 GT3, a 4-litre flat 6 block that makes 493 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.3 seconds. Pretty important, as that GT3 engine cemented this car as a real GT product for many people. It makes 25% more downforce than the standard GT4, so paired with that performance it was 23 seconds faster around the Nürburgring with a time of 7 minutes and 3 seconds, not bad for a Cayman. Though I will say, between the two I would take the Spider RS instead. GT3 RSs these days are well respected, but it took a few generations for them to really warm up in the market, with the growth of Porsche's prominence as a popular brand and the growth of people's interest in buying a track focused race car. I think the first GT3 RS to properly hit the modern levels of popularity was this, the 991 GT3 RS. It came with a 4-litre flat 6 engine that makes 493 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.2 seconds, very similar specs to the Cayman GT4 RS. What's crazy about the 991.1 is it's actually slower around the Nürburgring than the Cayman we just spoke about by 17 seconds, but it's probably still the more desirable car as a 911. These have magnesium roofs, full carbon bucket seats based on those you'll find in the 918, a cage and a bunch of other race specific features you only find in race cars like a pit limiter. Though these do look aggressive, as they predate cars like the McLaren center, I do feel like the track focus jump was significantly larger between this and the 992 GT3 RS than any other generation, despite this car's prowess. To get into one, you need to spend around £125,000 at the bottom end, and they're typically findable from 2015 for around 135k. Now let's talk about a car that will go down in history as one of the most special Porsches of all time, even though on release it wasn't that well loved. It's 911 996 GT2, already respected as a modern classic, and I think probably still undervalued compared to where it will be in the future. That's especially true when you consider the 996 GT3 RS is sitting at around 150k bottom end, whereas these start at around the 100k mark, and can be generally had from 2004 for around 110k. And I would say even the 996 GT3 RS is a bit undervalued. This is the only non-naturally aspirated car on the list, with its twin turbocharged 3.6 litre flat 6 that makes 483 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.9 seconds. Not bad for one of the oldest cars on this list. This wasn't the first GT2 with the 993 taking that title, but they are worth over £1 million, and they were built specifically to homologate for GT2 racing. The 996 GT2 wasn't a homologation car, with the GT3 being that car instead. It got a crazy different body kit to your average 996 outside of the controversial headlights, but most importantly it only came as a manual. It's a true driver's car built for the roads, and I reckon long term these are great news on values. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, then do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. And let me know in the comments down below, what is your personal favourite ever Porsche? We spoke about the 997 GT3 RS, but for significantly cheaper, we could get ourselves instead the 997 GT3, which is a collectible car in its own right. You can actually get into a 3.8 litre example within our price range for around 100k, but the smaller 3.6 litre can be had for around £78,000. That's almost half the price of the RS, yet the two cars share the same basic specs, with that 3.6 litre flat 6 that puts out 409 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.2 seconds, 0.1 seconds slower than the RS. This was the first Porsche GT product to receive Porsche active suspension management, though specifically track focused, helping it to run the Nürburgring in 7 minutes 42 seconds, 15 seconds slower than the 4 litre 997 GT3 RS, which isn't bad considering how much cheaper it is. Part of that is because these got a serious focus on aero, with Porsche getting them to have zero lift. It's all downforce, keeping the car super stable on track. Also, if you prefer slim bodied 911s, this is much slimmer than the RS, so you're in luck given how much cheaper they are. I think it's actually pretty crazy that the 997 GT3 and following 991 GT3 start at the same price, as you can find the 991 anywhere from around £78,000, with plenty available from around 2014 for 85k. That's for a car that both looks and feels significantly more modern, and in terms of on-the-road pace isn't that far away from the 991 GT3 RS we just spoke about. That's because it gets a 3.8 litre flat 6 block in 991.1 spec, which puts out 468 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.4 seconds. For me, this is one of the best value for money cars on this list. It's a 911, it's modern, it's stunning, and it's going to turn heads of fellow enthusiasts everywhere you go, and only really dropped below 100k in the last couple of years. They definitely arrived during the Porsche price bubble prime though, as list they were 100k without spec options. Those prices have likely dropped as extended warranties are starting to end after some early recalls for issues with weak rod bolts. They got some cool tech too for a GT3, like 4-wheel steering, but all in I don't think you get a Porsche that feels as supercar-esque within this price range. We mentioned the GT4 RS, let's take a step down to the 718 GT4, which basically took the formula set by the 981 GT4 and offers some more aggressive specs and an optional PDK gearbox. And despite being a manual purist, I do respect a good PDK, especially as a track car. It makes track driving feel like a video game. It came with a 4 litre flat 6 block that makes 414 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.3 seconds, not as potent as the RS by any means, but plenty for UK roads. These were the typical evolution over the 981, with 50% more downforce, more adjustability, and a bunch of improvements to the dynamics to try and dial out some of the understeer the 981 was apparently known for. Most changes therefore come under the pretty looks, with much of the suspension setup taken from the 911 GT3, as well as the brakes and the stability control taken from the GT3 RS. Again though, I'd probably want to go for a Spider for day-to-day use, as it's one of the best looking cars to come from Porsche in the last few years, at least in my opinion. These start at around £65,000 now, with plenty available for around the 70k mark from 2014. Just missing out on the top spot, we have the Porsche 911 996 GT3, which I find particularly interesting, as that means between this and the 996 GT3 RS, we have all the other cars mentioned on this list. You can literally get both the 997 GT3 and 997 GT3 RS between the price of this car and its RS equivalent, proof of how difficult it can be to predict the prices of these Porsche GT cars. These actually start at around 60k nowadays, despite being the first ever 911 GT3, and you'll typically find them for around 75k. For that kind of money, you'll be getting a 3.6 litre flat 6 block that makes 381 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.4 seconds, matching the 996 GT3 RS completely with the same Metzger engine. These were homologation cars for the FIA GT3 Cup, picking up where the previous Porsche RS models left off. It takes many engine parts from Porsche race cars and got all the other bits you'd expect to get it track ready: brakes, suspension, lightweight alloys, and a bunch more downforce. It's slim bodied again too, and a certified future classic in my books. Taking the top spot on this list, meaning it's the cheapest GT you can buy, is the 981 GT4. Of course, this was the first time the GT badging was applied to a Cayman or Boxer setup, but it wasn't necessarily the first time we saw this kind of formula, as the previous generation 987R was arguably the genesis of the GT4 range. Regardless, I promised you GT badged cars, and this is well worth a look, with its manual only gearbox, the telltale spoiler, and optional cage in the Club Sport spec. These come with a 3.8 litre flat 6 engine that makes 379 brake horsepower, taking them to 60 in 4.3 seconds, meaning despite less power, they actually match the 718 GT4 to 60. This engine came from the 991 Carrera S instead of any other GT products, but it did get its brakes and dampers from the 991 GT3. It was also the basis for the Cayman GT4 Club Sport race car, which roguely came with a PDK gearbox despite the road car only coming in manual. £58,000 will get you into one of these, and you only need to spend around 60k, as plenty sit at that price from around 2015. And so there you have it, the 10 cheapest GT product Porsches you can get into. I hope you enjoyed. Do hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and click on screen to see some more depreciated Porsches.